Hello, everybody. Welcome to another exciting episode of Jimmy's Jambox. We're here. We're back at it again, and we're going to get on into it. But before we do, as always, please make sure to like, subscribe, push all the buttons, do all the things. You know, I don't know where they are, but you do, and I trust you. Also, shout out to Undercaste Studios. We're here up in Seattle today for a few interviews, and we're very appreciative of them to let us use their space. With that being said, here's a quick word from our sponsors. Organic herbs and botanicals, skincare and edibles, wellness for body and mind. The Brothers Apothecary, fine teas and remedies. Ronald Records, from indie gems to classic hits, discover the heart of local music. With live shows all the time, up close and personal, and regular releases on their in-house label. Ronald Records, supporting the community, one track at a time. All right, thank you all so much for watching. Again, shout out The Brothers Apothecary, Ronald Records, and Portland Water. Thanks for keeping us hydrated. And with that being said, let's go ahead and get on into it. Here is today's guest.
Hi, I'm Petrey with Girl Swallows Nightingale, and I'm from Oakland.
Hello. Thank you so much for joining us and for making the trip.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm
Yeah.
glad the timing worked out, and you got to come see a show.
That's true, and we're going to talk all about that later on in this. But why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about, who you are, where you're from, what you do. Give us that like Tinder profile of your involvement with music.
Yeah, I have this project called Girl Swallows Nightingale, and I like to say that they're ethereal bangers, but it is a mix of like synth, dream, art, punk, pop, I guess. It's a lot of world building goes into the music, like sound wise and also lyrically. And yeah, I live in Oakland, California with the rest of my bandmates.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, the project's been going since I think 2017 or 18.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And did it start as like just you, or is it like everybody? Or like did you like kind of
my project?
Okay.
Yeah, but then I kind of had certain musicians in mind of who I'd want to have this band with.
Gotcha.
But it's definitely like my project.
Okay, cool. And we'll dig into that a little bit more in the middle as well. But what got you started in music initially?
I just have a very musical family. So my mom and dad were both musicians. My mom's from Japan, and she left Japan when she was 18 because she loved American music. And then she was an exchange student in LA playing jazz bass. And then she met my dad at a pizza parlor.
Okay.
And he was playing with his band. And then that's how they met. And then they ended up playing in a band together. And then they would like perform back and forth in Japan and LA for 6 or 7 years after they got married.
Oh, wow.
So they were musicians. And then like my brothers are musical as well. So I just kind of grew up playing music, but not in like a conservatory way.
Yeah.
Just
you weren't like forced to play. You were just, it was always around you.
It was always around. We always had instruments. I do have a very like key memory of how I started playing cello. And this is when I was in Wyoming, which is where, I'm from LA, but I grew up in Wyoming, had a childhood there. And I just remember like walking into the gymnasium where they had the orchestra class, and it was like my elective was to take orchestra. And I just saw this like beautiful lady with like long black hair playing this cello, and she was my teacher, Mrs. Cook. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I just want to be like her. So yeah, shout out to her, because that kind of started me. And then I played cello all through like up until the first few years of college.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And do you play any other instruments now?
Yeah, my main instrument is my voice. And then I just plunk around enough on keys to like write write music.
Gotcha.
But I'm not like a piano player or anything. I just play enough to like have a band and to write. And I'll write for different instruments, and I like mess around on guitar and stuff. But my main instrument is voice, and then cello after that.
Gotcha. Okay. And do you get to do a lot of cello in your like current project?
I don't, unfortunately. I did play cello on the first album, and I want to start bringing cello onto the live set, but I have so much stuff already.
Yeah.
Like I've got 2 keyboards, and then I'm also dancing in the show, and I'm not really consistently playing big enough stages to where it's comfortable to like have so much instruments on stage and be dancing. So, but I would love to I want to start, like maybe next year is the goal, to start bringing cello in on like an electric cello into the full band set.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, because it's not the smallest instrument.
Well, the electric one is like pretty easy, and it would be on a stand, and they're like slim, but it's just,
Okay.
I already have so much to load in and load out, and I'm like physically so exhausted after the shows because I'm a very physical performer too. So it's like not just the manual labor of being a musician, but then my actual performance is very physical. So
Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah, like, but I would love to add cello to the live show.
Yeah, that would definitely be cool.
Yeah.
Now, before we get into you in the present day, I do have a couple foundation questions I'd like to check in with everybody on.
Okay.
And this first one, it's one we ask early, it's one we ask often, and it's definitely a crowd favorite. What was the first album you ever bought with your own money?
Oh, that's really hard. I don't know. With my own money, but when you're a kid, is it your own money? I mean, if your parents gave
yeah, like if you have money, and like, what was the one that like you went and bought of your own accord?
It has to be a soundtrack.
Okay.
I'm not sure which one. Maybe like a Lion King soundtrack, or maybe Prince of Egypt soundtrack, or like, I know something cinematic for sure.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it would have been the first album that I bought, but I can't recall like which one. But I loved movie music. That tracks.
I was gonna say, yeah, I've got a note that is like on point with that particular fact, so that's cool to know.
Yeah.
And then, what was one of the first live shows you ever went to? That was like specifically one you wanted to go to.
Well, there's not a lot that comes to Wyoming. So I think like bigger concerts. So when I was 14, we moved back to LA area, and I went to high school in Palmdale, where Afro-Man is from. So very big, like culture shock. But then finally, we were like close to LA, so all the big acts can come through there. But I think I definitely went to other shows, but the one that sticks in my mind is I saw Yo-Yo Ma at the Hollywood Bowl with the Silk Road Ensemble project. And that it was just like one of the most, I went with my mom, and it was just one of the most like incredible concerts. And I love how much Yo-Yo Ma loves music. It's like a very pure love for the craft, and he has like no ego. And I've seen him multiple times now. But just no ego. It's just all about the music. And it was almost like the Silk Road Ensemble was like watching the Olympics of musicians, because they're from all over the world, like along that geographical area. And then they're just like the best, from each region, and they're all playing together. I mean, it was just epic. So that was really a really wonderful concert.
I could only imagine. That sounds awesome. And then before we officially get into the present day, do you have a defining moment that you decided you wanted to take music more seriously?
I'm trying to think of well, yes. So, basically maybe up until halfway through college, I was like pretty set on wanting to be a dancer, like in a company. And so I was dancing a lot, but I was also doing music, and I was also doing theater and like kind of all the performing arts. But I just remember something kind of switched in my brain where I was like, it's so, I realize that I get a lot more satisfaction out of making something original that's mine. And as a dancer, like I don't have like a natural affinity for choreography. I could just like execute things, but it really takes a lot of work for me to like come up with something. Whereas with music, it's so easy. I just go for a walk and I write something.
Gotcha.
And so I was like, well, I get a lot more satisfaction like being the creator and like having a vision for something, whatever the medium is. And so I was like, okay, I think I want to like make music more of a priority than dance. But I still love dancing. It's just, yeah, I didn't really think I'd be happy just like trying to like execute moves in a company. And I'm not even like, I wouldn't even make like a really top company anyways. So it was just like, I think I'll just put more energy into making stuff that's just original and it feels like it's mine.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. And you were still even able to incorporate dance into your music now. So
Yeah.
it's not like you left it behind.
No, yeah. I took a long break from it because I kind of burned out from it. But now I have so much fun dancing and like getting to just take the parts that are fun for me and like put it in my show.
That's awesome. Well, then let's go ahead and let's talk about you in the present day now. We are going to get a super easy one out of the way though. How'd you pick the name?
It just kind of came to me. I read a lot of mythology and I was reading some Greek mythology, and a swallow and a nightingale were both in the story. And then I just, the combination of words came together. But it kind of has a lot of things like wrapped into it. Like I think it's open to your interpretation, but the title can be very like folkloric or mythological sounding. It can also feel like very sensual as well. It can be, it's also my twist on an homage to Ozzy Osbourne's story of like biting the head off of a bat. And so you kind of think like Girl Swallows Nightingales is like this really kind of beautiful image, but also I think, you know, someone's sound or their voice, whether it's like musical or just another kind of creative voice, it does come out of like a figurative death of other things. And it doesn't have to be bad, but it's like these experiences is what creates and makes your sound. So I like the idea of like, you know, something has to, like she has to eat the nightingale in order to like create this sound. So there is an element of like suffering built into it. But it's really just like, yeah, it felt very, again, with like my world building aspect to my music, it seems to kind of fit. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And I don't really, I mean, I like my name, Marika Petrey, but I like to create like a world that I can make music inside of or like build inside of, like separate. I feel more free that way.
No, I could dig that for sure. I won't touch on it for too long, but in my last band, Smooth Talk, we had this whole other element within the music. Like we had two different styles of songs, ones that were just for the sake of music, and one that was actually like we were telling this progressive story of these characters. So every time you heard a song, it was a move forward in that element, and eventually we were going to compile them all together and make a separate special album that came with its own graphic novel, so you could actually like see.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and like the first song is literally how this group met. And like it wasn't like we weren't them, like they weren't us in the realm, but like we would use instruments to represent certain members of that story from time to time.
Aww.
So yeah, it had this like kind of like this interesting adaptive, like there was something in there that like the music kind of tells the story of. But I mean, I can definitely see a lot of world building in your music just from the way that it's presented and kind of the stylistic sounds you use even. So I appreciate you sharing that. Now let's go ahead and let's talk about your writing process a little bit. And we're going to break it up into chunks, but we're going to start right at the beginning. So when you get inspired, you're ready to make music. What are some of the things you do to get a track started?
I guess I try to not think about, I kind of throw the word inspiration out the window because I feel like you just have to show up regularly. And like sometimes you do get this sudden hit of inspiration, but I feel like you can't count on it. You just have to do the work. And I think Esperanza Spalding had this really great quote, and I'm like not doing it exactly how she did, but basically like the muses will show up to someone who's in shape. So if you just show up every day and you just write, for 30 minutes every day, that's like that much more percentage of time where the muse has an opportunity to show up. So I try to just regularly write, whether I'm inspired or not, and then stuff just kind of happens. I am, though, also learning about like taking breaks and how sometimes you just go off and do life, because I'm such a like workhorse. So now I'm realizing when I just go off and do life and have other things, stuff just gets worked out in my brain when I'm sleeping or doing other things. And then when I come back and write and I have taken a little break, it just like dumps out. It's like all kind of built up. So yeah, but I don't count on inspiration, honestly, for anything, because it's a nice little cherry on top, but you can't rely on it. It's like you just have to work on being easily inspired by like little things in life, and also just have like work ethic. So that's kind of my approach.
Damn, that is actually a really cool take on it. I appreciate that. And I mean, it definitely, I hear all the time about like artists who are like, oh, I needed to stop doing this and like go live my life to have anything to even be able to talk about. And I think that that's such an important aspect of making music, is like having elements of your life to put into it. If all you're doing is making music all of the time, then your music is just about making music all of the time. And that's not relatable to the world, even to at least anybody outside of those people who make music. So that makes sense. And then once you get a track finished writing, so it doesn't have to be released and recorded per se, but once you've gotten to the point where you're ready to start learning it and putting it, like getting it out there, how long does it usually take you to feel comfortable to perform it?
Oh, it just depends on the song. Some songs are just harder, and then some require, bandmates, or so it just really depends. Like something I might just sit down and write and I'm just done, and I'm like, oh, I love how simple it is, and I just did it. And then others, there's like time changes or things like that, or I know I need these other parts to come in, and so then I have to, rehearse it with the group. And then when I rehearse with the band, like we have a pretty organic arranging process. And I choose bandmates and any collaborator like very specifically for what I feel they would bring that's unique. I do, write certain parts out that I'm like, okay, definitely need this or definitely need that. But I also leave room for a person to like come in with ideas, and I like, that's the fun part for me about like working with a band, is having the collaboration in the arranging process and stuff. Because otherwise, we'll just do it solo.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, you work with some talented people for sure. Like, I have
so
to shout
fun.
Out. Yeah, I have to shout out the Mowgli. I know him as Anthony. He's just a longtime friend and old drummer as well. So we have that connection there. And we talked about a lot of your music on his episode way back in the day.
Oh, okay.
That was I have it on my notes here, episode 232, back when it was like audio only. So there's actually, if y'all want to go check that out on Spotify, there's like a whole breakdown and experience in that there from way back when we did that.
What episode number is this?
This one, I couldn't tell you. I think it'll be in the 570s. I'll have to look. Yeah. But now let's go ahead and let's talk about some of your music. So, again, I was very fortunate enough to be able to actually see you live. I don't get to do that often on the show. So I have some of my notes kind of mixed in with that as well. But like on Spotify itself, you've got music going all the way back to 2020. And I feel like, you said you started the project back in 2018.
Yeah, 2017, 18.
Okay, so right in there. So first of all, I really like your sound. I think it's very put together and it translates well live, especially for, your performance last night was just a solo performance. I have seen a lot of people who like, they do kind of they like try to take parts of like a perform thing with a band and like make it their own thing and it has this missing element, but yours doesn't. It's very full. It's very presented. And even further past that, it sounds like the album, but it still sounds live. Like, it's not just a over one copy. So I mean, and I know you played a lot of newer music, but like sonically, You have a great presentation. You have a really interesting sound. It's very expansive. Like you let the instruments kind of breathe in their own spaces, and your vocals kind of do the same thing. Like there's moments where you're getting very open, very like nearly operatic even, and then moments where you're very vocal, you're very verbal. You express a lot, and then just kind of times where you let your voice be like almost more of an instrument than words, and it really adds this interesting and unique layer to it that makes everything else underneath it, because your music is very cinematic like that. There are a lot of moments in it where you hear all these like explosion sounds and these like crashes and bangs and like all these moving parts. So there's like a journey in your music as well, but your vocals, the way they sit on top of it and the way they kind of weave in and out of it, it's a really enjoyable experience, both in a listening platform and live. So that was just a really cool comparison.
Thank you. That's so sweet.
And your most recent track is it Hono?
Hono.
Mm-hmm. It's a really cool track. Like it just the way that it moves around, the way that it like opens up. It starts out very almost like wide and reverberous, but then the second the shaker kicks in and then the triangle and then everything else, it just kind of opens up.
Shout out to Ben, because that triangle hit is so perfect.
It really,
most perfect triangle ding ever. That is a different kind of track than the rest of them, because I wrote that one specifically for the credits song of a movie that I just produced.
Gotcha.
So it's not really like everybody on that track. They're actually not my bandmates. They're other composers on the film. Okay. So I, released it as Girl Swallows Nightingale. It has my voice and there's like some of my style on there, but it's not really like, it's atypical compared to the rest of the music. But it was really fun to compose. Yeah, I wrote that song in 24 hours, basically.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was an all-nighter. I produced the score for the film, so I was working with like a main composer and then some other composers for all the different scenes, and then had to come up with a credit song. So put that together within just like a few days, but that triangle. Yeah, it definitely. I'm so glad you like noticed that.
Yeah, no, it hits.
It's so good.
But I do this bit where I pick out a track that I really liked. Now, like I said, because of Mowgli's episode, there are already 4 tracks that are on there that were talked about. So I decided to go with a more recent track, and I chose is it FAU or is it just FAU?
Either FAU, FAU. I say FAU.
Yeah, and I mean it's 5 minutes and 1 second long, and it's just a roller coaster of music. It's got like these chill moments. It gets wide open at certain parts. The bass in certain parts are enormous, which shout out to your Korg for that one. That is one of my favorite synths, but we're not going to hear that. And there's even like drum and bass at one point. Like it kind of has all the elements, but I think what I really like about that track is it's the perfect elevator pitch track. If somebody asked me to show them one song of yours to let them know what you sounded like, that's the one I would go to, because it has kind of everything, but it doesn't just feel like a medley of things you put together. It's a very like well composed track. And so I really enjoy it.
Thank you. It's actually my personal favorite.
Oh, cool.
Of anything that I've put out, it's my favorite song. For sure.
Yeah, well, that was gonna be my next question, so that's great. And I mean, it is. I think it's, and I know you have kind of you got something new that you're working on, or at least working towards. What can you tell us about what you got coming up next?
Yeah, so my second album, all the songs are written, and actually FAU is one of the singles from it. But it's called Chrysanthemum. That's the second album, and yeah, I think that FAU is like very representative of the kind of the direction that some of my sound is going. And yeah, Chrysanthemum, the title comes from the flower, which is like traditionally actually a grieving flower in a lot of different countries. And I was writing all these songs like during the time that I had lost a few people. My dad passed away, and then also one of my best friends passed away, like all around the same time. And so I kind of, I was just writing all of these songs, but chrysanthemums like come in all these different colors. So I started researching like how the meanings of the different colors in the different countries. And there was so many, the grieving process is so, it's not just being sad. There's also like such intense like joy and like an element of rebirth to it as well. And it's not linear. And so, I started just kind of matching colors and meanings of chrysanthemums with the different songs. So yeah, this album is kind of like, I think expressing all the colors of and the feelings of chrysanthemum.
Gotcha.
That whole range of grieving process, which again, it isn't all sad. Like some of it is very like lush and very beautiful. And I think like when people pass away, there's like it's like a focus pull. Like immediately you know what's important, what's not important, how you want to spend your time. You also feel like an intense sense of gratitude. So yeah, it's kind of the range of what that process is. And that's the second album.
Oh man. Well, that sounds really powerful. I'm definitely excited to hear it when it comes out. And now let's take a moment and let's zoom out. Let's look at kind of music as a whole. What are some of the things about either new music in general? So if you're like one of those people who's always listening to the newest thing, or at the very least music that's new to you that you found recently that you enjoy and you're finding inspiration in at the moment?
I guess lately, what I've been listening to most recently, just like driving, is Travis Scott.
Okay.
And
yes, I see a lot of his music in your. No, I'm kidding.
I think it's just because there's something about his voice. Like I think also I'm a dancer, so I like to work out to music that is danceable, or like I'll do like my stretches and flows and stuff to stuff with a lot of micro beats like James Blake or like that kind of stuff. And then Travis Scott, when like, you know, the workout increases, then I'll put him on. But there's just something about his voice that I like, and I can't really pinpoint what it is. But the first time I really like listened to him and I didn't know who was singing, it was like a James Blake, it was like Miles High or something, a James Blake, Travis Scott track. And I just heard this, heard his voice on there, and I went to go see like, who is that? And there's just something about his voice that I really like. So been listening to that a lot. I'm a big FKA Twigs fan. I loved her album Magdalene. I listened to that like so many times. So I'm excited for her new album that's dropping.
Oh yeah.
But I have to say I'm not a huge like consumer. I will get into something and then just go really deep for like a whole year. But I don't like a lot of things when people are like, oh, you know this, I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't really grow up with like TV. I didn't grow up with a lot of access to that type of thing, like pop culture. So I'm not like your proper 90s. Like I don't know what the 90s babies experience because I was like not exposed to a lot of that stuff. That's why I listen to tons of movie music or like music that honestly wasn't even in English.
Yeah.
So I just don't know a lot of things. Like I feel like a foreigner sometimes, like just hanging out with my friends because they have all these inside jokes about shows and pop culture and different things and different music or artists. But I'm just like, I don't know who you're talking about. So it's kind of embarrassing. But
no, I mean, it's interesting because everybody's experience on that is so different. But there's that like assumption that everybody from a certain time knows all these certain things. But similar to you, I didn't grow up with a lot of music, as weird as that seems. Like it wasn't until high school that I like found like what people listen to. And so other than like the 10 CDs my dad had, like I wasn't out there like experiencing new things unless it was like passive on the radio. And it was always like classic rock. And I never really cared about that as a kid. So the journey of music, I think it's wide, and it's not really until you like get to a certain age, it feels very like one-sided and linear, but there's so many routes that can be taken. And so I think that expresses well in your music, even because, your music does feel not heavily influenced by a million things, but at the same time, it feels thought out. It feels comfortable. And so I think that translates well within that. But then to wrap up this middle portion before we get into the next bit, This next question is probably the densest question in the interview. But we've talked a lot about, your experience with music, the actions, the reactions. But when it's just you and the music one-on-one, what does music give back to you?
It just makes me feel good. Yeah, do you mean like the process of making it?
Yeah, I mean, listening to it, creating it. You can take this one however you'd like.
Yeah, I think I physically kind of feel sick if I haven't made music in a while. And it doesn't mean like I have to make my own, but even just played or like sang, I just feel very like, I just kind of feel like a little bit sick. So I guess it is a way, it's just a way of expression and it feels good. And then I guess there's kind of I would break it down into two. There's like the performance element of music that's very like, I think I need that for my health, which is just like, it's that immediate feedback of like, this just feels so good right now in the moment. And then there's like the long-term stuff of like making an album or making any kind of art piece that takes time, and it's not like an immediate like I express myself right this instant. It's like you express yourself a year later because that's when it's done, or many years later when it's done. That kind of fulfills like a more mental part where it's like, oh, I've always, this is kind of everybody in my family, like I've always had vision for things, and I just know if I have an idea, I'm basically tunnel vision until it's done, and I have to get it out of my system or I don't feel good. So there's, with the projects, it's kind of like I'm just letting, it's like satisfying kind of a mental part first. That's also, it's driven by, the drive comes like from the emotion. But then the performance aspect is like about, I don't know, like I need it for my soul. Like I have to just be doing that to feel good and just play music with people and like feel it. Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Now let's go ahead and let's move on to some hypothetical questions.
Okay.
And for these, sky's the limits. The questions are all made up, so the answers are allowed to be as well. But this first one is pretty straightforward. If you could work with any one person, the only requirement is they have to be alive. Who would you want to work with, and how would you want to work with them?
Oh my God, it's really hard.
And this can be more of a just like a first person that comes to mind. It's not like if you pick one, the rest of the world is off the table.
Yeah, okay. I think I would love to watch Bjork work.
Okay.
I'm not sure how, like, I would just want to observe. Like her process in the studio and her writing process. And also she has a whole team too, so I'm just curious how, I love watching how people work with different elements of a team. So like Esperanza Spalding did this epic like live, she made an album called Exposure, streamed it. I don't know if you were watched that.
No.
She just restreamed the whole process, but she had cameras running for 72 hours.
Wow.
And she wrote and recorded with like Robert Glasper and all these other amazing musicians, like a 10-song album from start to finish. She wrote them and recorded them. And they were just like doing, and just, it was called Exposure, and showing the whole process. And just, I love just observing how she spoke to the different musicians and how, because that's something you just have to learn by doing, like basically directing. And so it was awesome for me to just watch like how she is in the studio, how she's talking to the drummer, how she's being a band leader while she's also like creating and coming up with ideas and writing lyrics on the wall. So I think like, it wouldn't necessarily be like working with someone, but like observing an artist that I'm really excited about. I'd love to watch like Twigs I'd love to observe just people. Oh, Peter Jackson from Lord of the Rings. I would love to watch him. Just like, I want to watch artists and like how they do their creation, but also how they communicate with their team. Because I think that's a big part of why they get to where they do, because they don't do it all by themselves either.
Yeah.
They like know who to pick on their team. They know how to communicate with them, and they're able to have these like long-lasting relationships with other artists over time to help build and develop like their sound and that collaborative style. So that would be my
hell yeah. That is a rad answer for sure. Björk, if you're watching.
I just want to watch.
Yes.
I just want to watch you work.
And then subsequently, who's a local artist that you're aware of that you haven't gotten to connect with yet, but you would like to?
Like in the Bay?
Yeah.
I've been there for a while. So I've kind of like worked with a lot of people. Like if I don't know them yet, then let's see. I mean, I'm kind of working with who I want to work with right now in the Bay. And if I don't know them yet, then I'll reach out. So that's a tough question because I've been there for a long time.
Who outside of the Bay Area then? Is there anybody that's on your radar that's like maybe like on the West Coast or like inwards a little bit?
And you mean like working with, like doing
that you could work with? Yeah, like somebody that you're like aware of, you just haven't gotten to like make music with yet.
I don't think I have anyone. Like I'm so kind of happy just living in my world making music, and then I get inspired by watching other people's stuff, but I don't necessarily feel like I have to work with them.
Gotcha. Okay.
It's like I already have enough on my plate.
Yeah.
I don't need to like add. And then when a project arises or I meet someone and it feels organic to work with them, and I'll be like, ooh, we've got some chemistry here. Then it's like, okay, there's something out of here. But I'm not really like, I already have kind of enough. I don't need to add to my plate.
Let's modify the question then. I'm going to ask you what I usually ask bands for this point in the interview. Who would be like a cool act to share a bill with? Like, who would you want to have Girl Swallows Nightingale perform with?
This is tough too. It's like, I'm still finding that.
Yeah.
Like, I think this is the first year where I was pretty excited about a couple bills that we were on. Mm-hmm. And it's just because certain bands that are finally kind of in the same realm as me have found me on Instagram and like, we're like, hey, we should do a show together. But this is the first year in all the times we've been performing where I felt like some of the bills made sense. Mm-hmm. It's actually really hard to find a bill for my band that suits us. And it doesn't mean the show's bad or something, but it's just like, we're not like a rock band.
Yeah.
But then we're not, we played with this one band in the Bay called Howan. Mm-hmm. And that was really, really a really great fit for us. Their sound like matched very well, even though it was different. Mm-hmm. So I'm still looking for other acts that I feel like would be a really good fit for our band. Yeah. And that's actually, so if anybody knows, that's been kind of a big, like that's the next check mark for me, is to like get a good list of like acts that are complementary to our sound. So tough question.
Yeah, no, definitely. Actually,
part of what I think has been holding me back a bit is not being able to find like good bills to open for.
Yeah.
Because the sound is just so...
Yeah, it's so particular and unique.
Yeah. And the other acts that we play with are great. It's just like such a different scene.
Yeah, it's like you want to make sure that their crowd can become your crowd and vice versa, that your crowd can become their crowd. So like everybody kind of grows the knowledge and the experience. Yeah, and I think, some people it's just hard to place. Like, and it's hard for me to find other acts that are kind of doing something that's like similar. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, I had somebody I was thinking of, or I wish I had remembered who it was. I want to say it was Colin Jenkins, but don't quote me on that.
Well, if you think of it,
I'm going to remember that for later.
I'm currently building a list, and it's not that many of acts. I'm like, okay, we sound good together, or like also visually. That's another. It doesn't have to sound, but it's like I'm very specific about the visual presentation as well, and so it's like you gotta like find.
Yeah, like something that fits.
Yeah, for a nice flow, because I love like a good flow for the audience from like start to finish.
Gotcha.
But yeah, it's a challenge.
Gotcha. Well, everybody watching, if you can think of somebody, put them in the comments. Let's see if we can figure it out. For this next one, like I said before, sky's the limits, and it's pretty literal in this sense. But if you could perform anywhere in the world, and you wouldn't have to worry about crowd access or building stability or power. It was guaranteed the best lineup, guaranteed the best show. And it doesn't have to be a venue. It could be anywhere. Where would you want to perform?
Oh my God. Probably in a cenote.
I'm not quite sure what that is.
So I went to Mexico, 2 years ago, and it was my first time seeing visiting cenotes, and they're these like underground pools. And they're just like, they're so epic. And I sang in one of them. I like went down. There was nobody there for some reason, because there's normally so many people, but there's like thousands of them, and they're these deep pools. It feels like a cave almost. You go down, and then there's like this calm water, and it's like so reverberant, but to like have a show there in one of those would probably be like a dream show.
Oh yeah, that'd be rad.
Yeah. I have a background in like immersive theater. And I had like an underground immersive theater company in my 20s. And we were always finding like really cool weird spaces to make theater, and you would build a piece around the space. Yeah. And so I like making music that way too, and like I'll go and practice in a stairwell, or because you just feel like the vibrations of the sound coming back into your body like differently when I practice in a stairwell, and it's the same with the cenotes. Like I sang in one, and I just felt so like it was just so cool to like bounce the sound back, and you can feel it like all around you.
Oh, that sounds really cool.
Yeah.
And then to wrap up the hypothetical questions, if you could get one more album from anybody, they could be alive, they could be dead, they could have not put out an album in 100 years, they could have put out an album yesterday. Who would you want an album from?
Joe Hisaishi. Like another Miyazaki Hisaishi movie. So I'm asking for an entire movie.
Fair. That's acceptable.
But yeah, they're both getting up there. But still making art. So probably another movie soundtrack.
I would take another movie. That would be awesome.
Yeah, but even if it was just like not a full movie, but if he just had like an album of like collections of small melodies or something, like, oh my God, because his melodies, they're just so I think there's just a magic to his melodies that they place me somewhere immediately when I hear them.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, I wouldn't even need it to be that like fully produced. It's just like his notes, like his like little scribbles.
Yeah.
And like that.
The ones that didn't make it into the movies officially.
Yeah, and they don't have to be fully like orchestrated. It's just like I want to hear like little snippets of like his brain and him at the piano. That would be really cool.
That would be rad.
Yeah.
All right. With that being said, though, we're going to go ahead and start wrapping this up. What can we look forward to between, let's say, now and April?
I'm trying to put out a couple singles for sure that are from the Chrysanthemum album. I'm thinking about, I just met this other musician. You were talking about, who do you want to work with? And I just met this other musician in the Bay who is a really incredible pianist and like multi-instrumentalist. So I'm thinking about maybe just like putting out an acoustic version of the whole album first, because it's something I could do faster.
Yeah.
And the song's already written, and I want them to feel fresh. It just takes longer to do the produced versions. Fully. I'm thinking about maybe doing that between now and then. I've got some shows. So October 17th, I'll be back in the Bay and playing a show at the Ivy Room. And yeah, I'm just kind of slowly plucking away at getting some of these recordings done. But I'm also already writing like the third album.
Oh, okay.
That's the part that like I have so much that I'm just always writing, but it just takes a really long time and money too, you know, because it's just like I don't have enough time off, or so I might just raise some money or something to just kind of get a chunk of it finished, because like I already wrote it. So, yeah. So hopefully at least a few singles, and then, you know, we'll see how fast they go. But for sure, Chrysanthemum, like the full album, as soon as I can finish it.
Gotcha. Well, definitely looking forward to that. For this next one, go and look straight at the camera. Tell everybody how they can find you.
Okay. Let's see. All right. You can find me everywhere you listen to music. Girl Swallows Nightingale on Spotify, Apple, YouTube. And then I'm primarily for social media on Instagram and TikTok, Girl Swallows Nightingale. And then if you don't like those things, I also have a newsletter, which is kind of my favorite thing. And I only send that maybe like once a month. But that you can just go to girlswallowsnightingale.com, my website, and you can sign up for the newsletter there. And then you won't miss anything, and you don't have to be on your phone to stay up to date.
Oh, yeah. And then any other plugs, any other shout outs, anybody else you'd like to put on while you're on here?
Yeah, my band. I love you guys. I've got Travis on bass and bass synth, Natalie on the keys. And she's also just really cool and does a bunch of other stuff. And then Mowgli, who is no longer our drummer because he just moved to LA. But shout out to the new drummers who are auditioning. So that'll be exciting. And I guess to my brother Sean for hosting me in Seattle while I was up here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And you for having me.
Yeah. And then before we get into the last question, I am going to steal the camera for just one moment. As always, y'all, please make sure to like, subscribe, push all the buttons, do all the things. You know, I don't know where they are, but you do, and I trust you. One more shout out to Undercaste Studios for having us here, and the Brothers Apothecary, Roland Records, and Portland Water. Thanks for keeping us hydrated. And with that being said, the final question. And this is entirely up to your interpretation.
Okay.
But what is an album you feel is more on the obscure side? So it's a deep cut. It's one not a lot of people would know, but it's one you think everybody should know.
I love this artist, Fatoumata Diawara. She's French Malian, and her first, I believe it's her first album. I love that album so much. It's like, when I listen to it, it feels like coming home. Like I've listened to it so many times. In general, I think I probably listen to music in other languages more than anything else, which is funny because last night someone came up to me, I think Casual Panic actually is going to be on. He was like, what language do you sing in? Which is actually a common question because I speak several languages, and I know that it affects like how I shape my vowels and how it's almost, and it's not, some of it is definitely intentional what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But some of it just happens, and I know it's because I speak several languages, and I'm very inspired by music and singers and how like the sound of their language affects their tone and their vowels and their consonants and all these things. So I feel like her singing style, like we sound totally different, but there's something about her sound that just feels like I just feel so like taken care of, and like just feels like coming home listening to her. And she's really, I'll read the translations, but I can tell she's just such a storyteller, and that's what I love about her. So Fatoumata Diawara, she's one of my favorite musicians of all time. Honestly, I love her. I've seen her live a few times. She's she's a dancer as well. And I love like Malian music, period.
Yeah.
but yeah,
That is a super good rec. She is phenomenal.
yeah, she's I don't know if you've seen her live, but she's
I have it now.
incredible. Yeah, she's just like, she's dancing. She's so good at talking to the audience. And like, I mean, just, she's the full package. Like she's everything. She's beautiful, fashionable, like everything. And just, there's like a true warmth that comes from her on stage. And you just feel like the sun is just like washing over you. Like it's just like, she's so warm. And one concert I went to, the power went out. And we actually, the whole audience, like we all had to vacate. And she was just out there like chilling. And then we were all just kind of talking and stuff. And she's just like chatting with people. I was like, oh my gosh, you're just like a queen. Like your goals like in life, music. I mean, I don't know her personal life, but just the way that she is in the world and carries herself, it's like so warm and giving. And it's, again, like it's not about her. It's just about like the music. It's such a beautiful thing. So people should check her out.
Yeah, no, very much so. That is a phenomenal rec. Thank you so much. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. This is fun.
Yeah. And this has been another exciting episode of Jimmy's Jambox. I'm Jimmy.
I'm Girl Swallows Nightingale.
And we're signing off. Later, y'all.
That's a wrap. This is not a podcast. This is a show. Keep jamming.